All right, good morning, everybody. 10:15. So we will call to order the December 18th meeting of the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee. Appreciate everybody joining us this morning. Also want to recognize future Regent Kathy Wolf Moore, who chose us over Basque to sit in on their meeting today. So my colleagues, we need to make sure that she made the right decision and make it an interesting meeting for her. But Kathy, appreciate you being here today and look forward to working with you. All right, first of all, we'll start with old business, which would include consideration of the minutes from the November 20th committee meeting on the K-State campus. Any discussion related to the minutes? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
I move we approve, sir.
We have a motion from Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Item B, following up on any issues raised on our agenda call from a couple of weeks ago. My notes don't indicate any. Vice President Frisbee, any members of the committee? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to new business. And if my fellow committee members are okay with it, given that item D, I know we have a lot of action items that will be on the board agenda this afternoon. I think the full board needs to know that we took the opportunity to consider those and appropriate make a recommendation on those. So I would propose that we bump that up to the first thing under new business. So basically moving item D up in front of item A. Anybody have any concerns about that? Okay. All right, that being said, first of all, any consent agenda items on this afternoon's full board meeting that any of the committee members would like to pull off and discuss? All right. Hearing none, would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the consent agenda. Motion by Regent Dicus, second by Regent Rolfe. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, consent agenda is approved. Moving on now to, yes,
It'd
absolutely.
be important we use. It's gonna be, we have a lot of people on Zoom today, so we'll need to make sure we use the mics.
Okay. Make sure the garland's not covering up my blue light here. All right, moving on to the discussion agenda. We'll have this afternoon's second reading of the proposed housing and food service rate proposals as submitted by the state universities. We took a lot of time to consider those last month at the November meeting. Vice President Frisbee, any of our business officers, any update to any of the information we heard last month?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The information starts on page 65 of your agenda for this month. We did update the tables to make sure that everything was accurately displaying the information behind. You went through and discussed with each of the CFOs last month, and I don't know if there are any questions or follow-up item that is needed for approval.
Any follow-up?
There's none for me. I feel like it was reasonable.
Okay. Understand the situation. Our business officers are in. Obviously, food cost. I don't have to tell Regent Rolfe this. I looked it up the other day, and food prices are up almost 30% just in the last 5 years. So we know that has created pressure on our campuses. So I'm certainly comfortable with the rates that have been presented. Any further discussion? If not, would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the proposed housing and food service rate proposals.
I'd move to recommend approval.
Okay. Motion by Regent Rolfe. Second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes, and appreciate our business officers for all their work in presenting that. All right, item 2 on this afternoon's agenda is the acting on the distribution of fiscal year 2025 appropriation for IT infrastructure and cybersecurity system. Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So starting on page 93 is some information. Just as a reminder, we received as a system for the public universities, so this includes Washburn, $7.5 million this year. You have allocated about a little less than half of that. So this is a request to distribute the other half for this current year. Reminder of what you did in September for new board policy related to IT and enterprise risk management. Our IT folks, the group we called RITSI and Kobo, have coordinated the request here. And our IT folks, and I believe Angela, the ICITO from Pittsburgh State, is online, who can also weigh in on the technical sides of this. They've done some yeoman's work here to coordinate their efforts. But the challenge that they're confronting is each of our universities is in a very different place for where they are right now and where they need to go. And so you'll see some amounts cited on page 94 for each of the universities that don't really add up if you compare individual amounts. So those are not intended for you to see those and compare, where KU Medical Center needs to spend 1.9 million, where Washburn only needs to spend 295,000 for cybersecurity tools. That is where that campus happens to be. And if you added up those amounts, it is more than the total at the bottom of the page, because what the IT folks have come up with actually will cost them more than what we have available. So the distribution you see below on the bottom of page 94 is what Kobo and RITSI are proposing for you to address at least a portion of the anticipated expenses, to address the highest priority areas that would be in keeping with the NIST framework that we've adopted as our, the framework within which we're going to try and improve our cybersecurity. Angela, if I missed anything, please feel free to step in.
Thank you. I think you covered it very well, Elaine.
Okay.
Angela, thank you for joining us today. I was encouraged to read the reference to Cabo and RITSI working closely to ensure collaborative sourcing. Really encourage all of you to see where we can collaborate and use the group power as far as purchasing. I should have given you a heads up that I was going to ask you this. Have you been able to find examples so far of collaborative sourcing that works for all the campuses, or a number of them?
Yes, we have. And we've done collaborative sourcing for many years, and shared contracts and what we call piggybacked on contracts I've been here 15 years, and we've done that for 15 years. So this is not anything new. What's the challenge is really what Elaine pointed out, and that is that we're at different places in our security posture. And part of that is because we're different institutions with different goals and different systems and different objectives. And those things are often decided outside of IT, right? So, but yes, we've already found some things this year alone in working with some different vendors in the 24/7 area for monitor, detect, and respond. We put together a bulk contract that several of the universities or institutions in this group, I think 4 or 5, are going to take advantage of. The others already have something in place, so didn't need to, and we'll continue to do that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And again, this is really not something that's new to us. We've been doing it for a while. The trick is getting everyone to, we're not purchasing geniuses. So we have to work very closely with our purchasing officers. So getting those folks on board and in the know so that we can all work together is a big piece of this.
Well, appreciate the two groups working together, because I'm going to step out on a limb and guess that there are more needs than there are resources. So certainly where we can maximize the resources is greatly appreciated. And I know you have a joint planning session, I think, coming up in January between the two groups, and would just encourage you to continue to look for those collaborative efforts.
Thank you. We agree.
Any questions related to the recommendations on the distribution of IT funds? Yes, Regent Winter.
Good morning. I have a kind of a follow-up question with respect to the collaboration. I don't care who answers this. In what area did you all find the best collaboration? That is, in what area did you identify savings and or quality improvements because of collaboration? I'm trying to figure out how much potential there is, how much potential there was in doing this better by collaborating and saving money by collaborating? Who can give us some enlightenment about that?
Are you able to answer that, Angela?
I think so. I kind of, it kind of faded away, but I think he was asking, where have we found collaborative options?
Correct.
Correct.
One of the ones is that I mentioned earlier with the managed detect response system, the 24/7 monitoring system. Historically, we've had collaborative projects with many software systems, and those continue today. Adobe, we have a Cabor-wide contract with them. We all share the same internet service provider where we're able to leverage cost and bid out as a large group for internet services across the state. And so we do that regularly, and we've done that for years, I think since 1992, actually. Many of us have collaborated on our learning management system. Most of us use a product called Canvas. Pittsburgh State was the first university to do that, and we've shared information on our contract. Many of us are on the same Zoom contract. So there's multiple examples that we've done in the past, and we're forging forward with that with the MDR here. And we expect that there will be some other pieces as well with other vendors like Lenovo, CDW, and we're working through those things right now.
Angela, thank you. On the other end of the spectrum, you just talked about areas where you could widen and improve collaboration. I want to talk about the other end. Was there a subject matter area or a topic where someone said, gee whiz, this is a real opportunity for us to collaborate, to save money, to improve the quality of our services, but that suggestion was not followed? I'm trying to figure out to what extent do we still have some future opportunity to collaborate in order to save money and improve quality?
We haven't run into that. And the only time that when someone isn't, able to collaborate, for instance, is if they don't need that product because they've recently purchased it or they don't use that product. So it wouldn't make sense for them to collaborate on it. It would just be spending funds and not a part of their overall security posture or a goal for their university, or perhaps they've already filled that goal. So for instance, last year with the legislative dollars, our university used it to put in a new firewall, which we were due for one of those. And so we upgraded our firewall. There are some universities this year that need a new firewall. It wouldn't make sense for us to hop on and be a part of that effort because we have a brand new firewall. So I think, again, back to what Elaine mentioned earlier, we are in different places with our security. And we all have that same goal of being at those NIST standards. But we're going to have different paths to get there. And if we're going to utilize the funding in a smart way, we're probably going to have to take those different paths, collaborate where we can, absolutely. But if we all buy some of the same products, even if we don't need them, that obviously isn't, a good use of funding. So those are the only times we've come across anything that someone said, oh, we can't be a part of that because we recently purchased that product or we're not due to replace that product.
What's in place in regard to that example you just talked about, some university wanting to buy a particular product? What's in place in a situation where there is a university who needs to buy, let's say, product ABC? Is there a process in place where that particular university communicates with the others and says, we are getting ready to buy product ABC. We want you to know if you want to come along with us, great. How sophisticated is our process to ensure that we're communicating and urging sharing where we can?
Well, there's no process at the board level, at the board office level. There's no central path at the board level to bring us all together. There's no central purchasing place or anything like that. So we all have to do it on our own. So at every RITC meeting, every meeting with the CIOs, that is a topic on the agenda. that we talk about. And I spoke recently with our purchasing officer here at Pittsburgh State University, and they also have it. Those purchasing officers, directors across the region institutions meet every month, just like like our RITSI group does. They also have that agenda or topic agenda on their agenda each month. So that is how we do it. We've created a spreadsheet that is centrally shared, and it's divided up by different areas of technology that we list all of our major products when they're due to be replaced, and are we going to replace them or are we going to be looking for something else? So if I'm looking for something, if I know that we have something coming up at Pittsburgh State University, I can go to that shared document and see who else is using that product or a similar product that I might be able to talk with them about and take action on my own. So that we're looking at that as more or less a roadmap so that we can help each other with those purchases in the future. And we just started that this summer. We had a summit where we all came together, many IT professionals across our organizations, and developed those roadmaps for different areas of IT in our organization so that we could share that type of information.
You mentioned there is not a process at the board level to coordinate. Have there been attempts to create such a thing?
I don't know. I don't know that I'm the person to answer
It's
that.
like you got somebody riding in on a white horse.
Jeff DeWitt.
Jeff,
All the contracts.
Jeff, will you turn your mic on?
All of the contracts we do have the ability for anybody to piggyback on them. So when we write a contract and Ethan calls me and goes, "Hey, I see you use this thing. They're all written so anybody can attach to them at any time." So that's just a process we have in place. So every procurement we do it in the context is all the other universities may want to participate on it. They're all written that way. So it kind of automatically happens. If people want to collaborate even after the fact, they can either bid it out themselves or they can piggyback on the contract.
So I'll say something that's kind of low hanging fruit. Obviously, we don't have that mandatory process. I would urge us to discuss how we can better communicate with each other. How can we better coordinate? How can we better economize? Because these IT costs are only going to continue to go up.
We meet monthly as CFOs and COBO, the procurement officers meet monthly, the CIOs meet monthly, and that is a major, we all need more resources. So that it's just a inducing phenomena, and our contracts are written to allow that. So I think it happens naturally, and we force it as well because we know their power, and the bigger the purchase, the better the deal typically. So we do that.
I think this is a great example of that collaboration. You guys, there's a little money, you guys figured it out. Cross-disciplinary and cross universities. So great job.
Agree. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Regent Dykes.
In this vein of cooperation, a year ago, one of our universities had some struggles with the, have we all collectively learned from that? Have people been able to implement things in their system? I mean, I guess I'm always I'd rather learn from somebody else's mistakes than my own. So, with this idea of collaboration on expenses, have we learned something across the system that it helps everybody?
Regent Dykes, thanks for the question. Thanks for the reminder of our event last.
I didn't say who it was.
Yes, we have shared our story quite well with not only COBO, but RITSI, and try to explain and share all the lessons learned that we garnered from that incident. And I think it's been I continue to reinforce that throughout our meetings as well. So we have tried to do that and share our experiences, not even just within the Regent system. We've also done it at other conferences as well, because everybody, is facing these types of challenges, and it's important to share our stories. Yeah.
It's one of those, it could hit anybody at any time.
Yep.
Yeah. So the more we can learn from one situation, the better.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Great effort, great discussion. Any other questions? If not, would entertain a motion to recommend approval. Have a motion by Regent Winter,
Second.
second by Regent Rolfe. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you again for all your work on that. Item 3 would be receiving a report on the university's facilities condition and space utilization. That'll be provided by Director Bristow. Anything to mention at this point? All right, look forward to that this afternoon. Moving on, item 4, act on allocation of fiscal year 2026 educational building fund appropriation. Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So annually, there has been a process in December for an allocation of the EBF funds for the subsequent year. And this year, based on information we got from the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group on property tax, we're estimating that we have $58.5 million available for 2026 to be allocated out across the system. The table using the traditional formula is at the bottom of page 96. And this is the fortunate happenstance we have in Kansas. I think if there is another state that has such a property tax mill levy, I am not aware of it. We've been lucky to have this for for over 80 years. And I know the legislature has their eye on this funding source, but it has been our one consistent source of maintenance funds for our mission critical buildings. So very important to our system.
Right. Obviously, there's a staff recommendation to approve these EBF allocations for fiscal year 2026. Any questions? Any discussion? If not, would entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Rolfe,
Second.
second by Regent Dykus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Approval is recommended. Moving on to item 5, act on allocation of fiscal year 2026 Campus Restoration Act Fund. Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you. This is our new program to launch in 2026. We have a transfer coming to our agency for 6 years, starting in 26, 32.7 million. 2.7 million will be $100,000 for each of the coordinated institutions, but $30 million is dedicated to the state universities. Using the same mission critical formula we use for the EBF, we have that the amounts there shown at the bottom of page 97. So this would be just the first year. This would not then lock it in for years, another 5 years. The goal would then be for the universities to come back with a plan for how they would leverage these funds, which if they're used for capital renewal, do have a 1-to-1 match requirement. If they are used for demolition, which is an option in this case, then it does not have a 1-to-1 match. And so how would they best leverage funds for their campus? And but this would be getting the first year of the program launched, basically.
I think that I'm glad you mentioned the 1-for-1 match, because that's important to point out. It would have to be non-state money that it's matched with. All right, so you have the recommendations in front of you. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Dykus,
Second.
second by Regent Rolfe. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Vice President Frisbee, for your work on that. All right, now we will receive updates from community and technical colleges on fiscal 2023 audit findings. And we'll just say at the outset, completely understand and respect that our institutions have their own local governing bodies. And as I read through the audits, noticed that a number of them have finance committees that meet on a regular basis. I do think we as regions have a responsibility to be accountable for all state funding of higher education. And I believe the community colleges receive close to $270 million per year in state funding. So I do think we have a responsibility to be accountable for that. So Vice President Frisbee, can you just quickly bring us up to speed? I know we had some initial discussion on this last summer. Can you kind of bring us up to speed on where we are and what we'll be hearing about today?
Certainly, thank you. So last June, I believe, we had one community college join our committee and talk about their audit findings. This is looking back to fiscal year 2023. So now we're in 2025. And at the time, tried to figure out how to have other two-year colleges that also had some audit findings or were identified as having material weakness or a significant deficiency in their audits, and just giving them a chance to come talk directly with you so it isn't filtered through somebody else's voice. And just briefly, now that some months have elapsed, probably have an update for the committee on how those audit findings have been resolved. And so that would be the hope that the colleges can just give you an update on how they've resolved those with their corrective action plans.
Okay, thank you. And I know a number of our community college representatives are joining us via Zoom this morning. Appreciate your time. So we will begin with Barton County Community College. I believe we have President Marcus Garteski, Trustee Mike Johnson, and Myrna Perkins, who is the Chief Accreditation Officer and Director of Financial Aid. So with that, I'll turn it over to the representatives from Barton County Community College. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Mark Dean. I am the Vice President of Administration here at Barton. Yes, we do have Myrna Perkins, Dr. Karstecki, and Chairman Johnson also on Zoom. Fiscal year 23 audit, we did have findings, and at that, you have a copy of that audit as well as a copy of the corrective action plan. The areas that we had findings in dealt with our TRIO program and also with our federal financial aid. None of the programs that we had findings with were pass-through programs through the state. So they were federal programs. They're minor significant or deficiencies. And in visiting with our auditors, if you are a low risk, they are required to audit 20% of your federal expenditures. If you're high risk, they're required to audit 40%. Our auditors audit 60% of ours just because of the size of our programs and the number of federal programs that we have. So it doesn't make any difference whether we are classified as low risk or high risk. We're audited at a much higher level. What that does, it allows them to find other things, which is what we want them to do because we want to get it correct. Typically, we will have our plan of correction plan in place and those changes made before the auditors ever leave. And it's actually typically done before an audit is ever presented. And that's how that was the case in fiscal year 23. For Barton, we've got a $37 million budget. Total dollar amount of these deficiencies was $70. And that was taken care of at the time the auditors were here. Most of these things have nothing to do with the financial stability of the college. They are things like with the TRIO program, you entered the date incorrectly for a individual that was becoming a member of Upward Bound. And unfortunately, we had gone to the federal representative to find out which way that date was supposed to be entered, and they didn't have that answer. And so a lot of times these programs, we don't have a lot of clear direction and until the audit comes up, and then we make those changes. So there was no financial impact whatsoever. It's just they were entered when they enrolled versus the first date that they started classes. And so those are the types of audit corrections that we had. I'll be glad to answer any questions. All of those deficiencies were taken care of, like I said, before the audit was ever presented to our board.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that explanation. Any questions or clarifications for Mark or the team at Barton County Community College? Yes, Regent Winter.
Mark, how long did it take you to pass the hat to raise the $70? Must have been done pretty quickly, I bet.
I would have written a check to take care of it right away, but, yeah, it was taken care of immediately. And those have to do with miscalculation of, funds as far as refunds. And, when you're dealing with 10,000 students and the amount of financial aid and the changes in the financial aid program, and I think we all know what everybody's been through this last few years with the changes. It's difficult. It really is. And quite frankly, if the auditor is not finding anything on programs as big as we are speaking of for all these colleges, the auditor isn't doing their job.
All right. Thank you again, Mark. Any other
Thank you.
questions for Barton County Community College?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have Fort Scott Community College, which I know they did have some material weakness identified in their audit. So very happy to have interim president Sarah Sutton and CFO Missy Scott joining us. Good morning. I'll turn it over to our representatives from Fort Scott Community College.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Sutton, interim president, and thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to come this morning. And just wanted to say a few things about our audit, and we'll let Missy Scott give you some details on how we are trying to remedy some of our findings. We have had quite a bit of turnover, like most institutions throughout all departments, and really trying to focus on this corrective action plan as we move forward and updating policies and procedures and training opportunities for all of our staff involved in the items that are laid out within the documents that we have sent. And so I'll let Missy go into some details on some items that we have addressed and continue to address.
Okay. Hi, I'm Missy Scott. I just have a few notes here as far as our corrective action plan. It was approved by our Board of Trustees, which I think we've already said. We have created a corrective action tracking spreadsheet to see our progress on this. Since I came in May, we've started a finance committee meeting and we meet monthly. We've been working diligently to address the internal controls in accounting and in our financial aid departments. We've hired a new financial aid director as well as an assistant director. And our former financial aid director, we asked her to come back. She came back and is still here working on a temporary basis to help train those new directors. And then we will be looking for additional training externally for our new directors. We also have several new employees in our business office, and we've been completing some cross-training and where that's allowable. So that's, we're working on processes, procedures, and updating policies.
All right, thank you both. Questions from the committee or our representatives from Fort Scott Community College? As Vice President Frisbee mentioned, we are talking about fiscal year 2023 audits. Would you anticipate by the time we get to the 24 audit that the weaknesses that were identified will be remedied?
I think we will still see very similar results because our administration was not in effect until late May of this year. So most of that period was completed before we came into the positions we're in now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see similar findings.
I feel very confident in the leadership that we currently have in place to continue on with this action plan. And as Missy has stated, unfortunately, we weren't here in these positions quite in time to get some of these items addressed. So we are working diligently now to address them.
Okay, Regent Rolfe.
Can you tell us how tied in your board of trustees has been, what the communication's like, how regular they are being informed of kind of your progress?
So since I started this position, we have monthly finance committee meetings that were not happening. So I assumed this role in late May, early June. And since then, we've addressed a lot of issues that our board of trustees, in collaboration with them, because some of those were not taking place previously.
I might add additionally, if we feel the need that we have something that's come up that we are questioning, we will run that through our finance committee board members. And, if we just some open communication between all of us.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you so much, Sarah and Missy. We'll move on now to Fort Hays North Central Tech. We have President Eric Burks and CFO Diana Ballman. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. And first, I want to just thank the committee for allowing us to meet remotely. I do apologize. I know Regent Rolfe, when you made ties optional for meetings, you probably never thought it would digress as far as sweatshirts. This is the first time I've worn a sweatshirt to a meeting. I am recovering from a hip replacement surgery, and then about 2 weeks into my recovery, my son woke up in the middle of the night. We ended up in the hospital, and now we're at Children's Mercy here in Kansas City, and he is recovering nicely. So that's but have been here for about 2 weeks, and so I appreciate the ability to join remotely, and I apologize for my overly casual attire.
No worries at all.
As it states in regards to the audit and the findings that were there, we have completed our 2024 audit. So just to go straight to that, and none of the findings that were cited in the 2023 audit were cited this time. In fact, you can see on the pages that we provided that we are seen as a low risk auditee, and also that there were no material or significant deficiencies in internal controls with both financial statements as well as our federal awards. In looking back, and quite frankly, this caught us a little bit off guard because we really had never been told by our auditors, or in looking through this, that we felt like we had any significant issues. As we look back through our audits all the way back to 2015, some of these same things were cited as far as and it's worth noting that we did switch auditors. So this year we had a different auditor than we'd had for the previous years since I've been president, which has been since 2012. That auditing firm had always marked significant deficiencies because of the size of our institution. No material concerns or anything, but as we look back through there, they had always marked that as a significant deficiency. Just as you can imagine, we run very lean. And while we have a lot of internal controls in place and all that, we don't have one person that's in charge of control. We don't have one person that's in charge of something. We have to share duties, but we do separate those duties. And so we make sure that the person who's writing the checks is not the person who's actually printing the checks. And we have all kinds of purchasing policies that our board enforces that require us to either bid things out or take them to the board. So we follow all of those and have throughout, but that's been something as we look back through to go, what happened in that year that was different? Actually, nothing happened. That was just something that that group of auditors had marked every year. Now, the one thing that was different was that we were marked as not a low-risk auditee. And what we found that, and I think the gentleman, the CFO from Barton, I'm sorry, Mark, I can't remember your last name, but he had mentioned that, whether you're qualified as a low risk or high risk, that's going to indicate the sample size that they're going to go through during the audit. And a lot of that, I think, is based off of, or at least for us, our federal grant activity. And so in certain years when we have higher federal grant activity, that our threshold goes up. In this case, it was above $750,000, a lot because of the COVID relief dollars that a lot of us were receiving at that time. And so that's why we were marked not as a low risk auditee. And so it just indicated they had to have a bigger sample size for what they were looking at. There wasn't anything necessarily that we had done or that was a deficiency or anything that had caused that. So just wanted to explain that. I'd certainly stand for any questions and appreciate your diligence in making sure that we're all good stewards of the funds. I know we all take that very seriously.
Well, congratulations on the clean audit for fiscal year 2024.
Thank you.
Very well done. Any questions, clarifications needed for Eric and Fort Hays North Central Tech? Yes, Regent Dodkins.
Are you getting any assistance, Wesley, from Fort Hayes now on any of these issues from an audit standpoint? Is there any collaboration that's going on there?
He's there. I'll let him answer.
Yeah, well,
Wesley?
you can answer too, Eric, because we work together. Yeah, we talked. Diana and I chatted about this. We had conversations and collaborated, and where there was possibility for us to work, we offer a hand of friendship and fellowship, and say, can we come over if you need help? Are there things you can do? And we will work together with our affiliates as needed.
Right. Any other questions? Well, Eric, thank you for your time this morning. Certainly keep your family in our thoughts and prayers, and wish your son a speedy recovery.
Thank you. With any, God willing, we'll be home for the holidays. So hopefully that'll be the case. I wish you all happy holidays and blessed 2025. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you again. All right, next up, we have Garden City Community College. We have President Ryan Ruda and CFO Carla Armstrong. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here with you as well. As each of the other institutions have mentioned, you have our documents and action plan in front of you. The one finding that we did have from the FY23 audit has been resolved as per the correction plan. You know, as Mark had mentioned and several others, this finding does not concern any financial stability of the institution, did not have any dollar amount tied to this there. It was simply on being able to have stronger oversight and processes. And as part of that, we have hired an additional staff person within our business office that is focused specifically on grants and helps in compliance. So it's helped to increase just our level of oversight and fiscal internal review there as well. But we have complied and completed our corrective action plan.
Okay. Questions or clarifications for Garden City Community College? All right. Thank you for your time this morning. A side question, Vice President Frisbee, it's been referenced a couple of times, federal programs, federal loan programs or grant programs. How do audit findings affect eligibility for federal loan programs?
It would depend on the program and the finding. I think the comments from the colleges speak to the level of complexity that the campuses have to manage administering not only our state programs, so the state pass-throughs, the data demands that we place upon them for enrollment information, and the federal programs that we administer that's passed through Carl Perkins and WIOA adult ed funds, but also the federal funds that go directly to them, and the challenges that they have in getting clear direction from the federal government and how they're supposed to do their reporting and all the obligations that they have to carry to stay in good standing. I am not aware of any of our institutions their eligibility participation in any of these programs is at risk anyway.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right, thank you. And last, but certainly not least, we have Seward County Community College. They had some material weaknesses that were identified in their audit as well. So very happy to have today CFO Madeline Day is on the line with us. Good morning, Madeline. Madeline, are you with us this morning? We can see you. I can't hear you. Madeline, can you hear us? That was fast. It looks like her camera has frozen up, so I give her just a moment to work through that.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can. Good morning, Madeline.
Good morning. President Bennett is also in my office with me. He was able to stay long enough to make the meeting.
Fantastic.
We have the same, we work with the same auditors as Barton County, so we do go into deeper dives in our federal funds as well. The material weakness that was stated has been taken care of immediately after it was brought to our attention. This was my first year end with Seward County, so I had a lot to learn, and we had a really late board meeting bringing bids to our attention. So this was completely my fault, but we have corrective actions in place and have taken care of all the findings as of FY '24.
Fantastic. Great news to hear. Any questions? Yes, Regent Dicus.
With a consistency across the board of similar issues and the deficiencies or material weaknesses, is there any, when we were talking about collaboration earlier between the four-year universities, is there any collaboration among the community colleges that can help each of them in these regards, since there's a consistency of the findings?
There is, Regent Dicus, an association of the community college business officers that meets regularly. So they're the CACBO. We have COBO and then there's CACBO, and they meet on a regular basis. And so those CFOs have an opportunity to talk as a group about challenges that they're facing. So I would imagine this is a topic where they do discuss.
And I know
lessons
there's only
learned.
4 of 19 here, so
Mhm.
15 did okay, but I mean, if there's some way they could have that assistance and help each other out, would be very helpful to the system.
Yes, yes. And I think also there's been reference where they've had staff turnover. That's a challenge at all of our institutions, 4-year and 2-year, for our CEOs and CFOs and other important staff on the campuses. So where there are some folks who are longstanding and have lots of experience, such as Vice President Dean at Barton, they can be a nice sounding board for new folks at campuses.
That's a good question. Yes. Regent
It's a
Rolfe.
little bit of an alarming number. I mean, I don't remember a year, my sixth, it feels like we've had this many findings. Would that be right, or is this normal?
I think the nature of these findings, this is typical to some degree. As Barton mentioned, the scale, the materiality of theirs, when you read it on a page, seems quite large, but the financial effect is minute. This is more, some of the concerns raised by the auditor are more compliance issues, like you didn't put the right date on for this student. Well, how does that really affect the operation of the campus? In a material way, not at all. But again, speaks to the complexities that they have in administering with these programs. It's challenging, especially when you have a lot of turnover.
And it certainly is, I mean, the action plans and strategies for mitigating these weaknesses is encouraging. I guess the proof in the pudding will truly be in the fiscal year 2024 audits. So when, Vice President Frisbee, when would be a good time for us to regroup? When do you think everybody will have their fiscal year 24 audits in hand?
The 24 audits are trickling into us. They come to us because we use those for developing our data books, which are going to be launched here in January. So in January, we'll have new data books for the community colleges, tech colleges, on the universities. They will be relying on still 23 information though. So for our coordinated schools, they're a year behind on what information we have to reference. But the 24 audits are coming in. And so we should have those probably by February.
Please, the fellow committee members, maybe we'll just make a plan by February or March that we revisit it and see how the 24 audits shook out. But appreciate everybody's time this morning and certainly appreciate you arranging that.
Are they keeping us informed? Because, I mean, if you take Fort Scott's comments that they basically, the management team got put in place in May of this year, right, not till 25 audits, you're going to see the improvement. You know, so are they keeping us informed as they go through the process as to when these things are being?
This would
Remedy.
be that informational sharing, this opportunity.
Through updates like today.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Regent Winter.
Chair, thank you. One of what I'm about to say is not any suggestion that any of these colleges have underestimated the importance of fixing these things. But I want to add another motivational factor. We are about to have a change in administration in Washington. I don't want to speculate about whether or not some of the articles you read are on or off. And by the way, I come from a background of banking where you deal with regulators all the time. John, I think they had me on speed dial there for a while. We had enough challenges. So I do have some experience working with regulators. I think that the fact that we're having a change in Washington and administration and the Department of Education should be one additional factor that makes us be certain that we're fixing these things and taking them very seriously. If there's a question, for example, about whether or not we have a college that ought to hire some other outside agency to help them fix it on close calls like that, I think because of the nature of the turnover, I would urge us to make those decisions. So hopefully we don't have any problems with that, because the important thing is we have obligations under federal law, and I know we take them seriously. But there's a new sheriff in town. We need to be careful not to give anybody else an excuse to further punish us.
And I think it further reinforces the need for cross-training of staff, because that seemed to be mentioned several times in the audit findings that we lost the only person that knew how to do this and lost a lot of institutional knowledge. So the cross-training and making sure that you're covered when somebody leaves is really important as well. Anything else before we move on? All right, great discussion this morning. All right, moving on now to item B, discuss board policy for internal audit and review internal audit plans. Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before Kate Neely from the University of Kansas comes up to present her annual internal audit plan, just wanted a little background for the committee. One item that we had placed on your committee work plan for this year was to revisit the board policy on internal audit for the state universities. There was some thought initially that that language needed to be updated to be in keeping with international, global new guidance that the internal auditors are going to have starting in 2025, January 2025. But rather, after talking to the internal auditors, it was determined that that language that we already have is broad enough that we don't need to make any changes. So you don't see any board policy suggestions today. A couple things that we have done to fortify the relationship, though, because one of the internal global changes is to fortify the relationship of the internal auditors for a corporation or any entity like a university to the governing board or the board of directors. So we've provided your contact information, Mr. Chairman, directly to the internal auditors, so that they feel the need to contact this committee directly, they have a path to that without anybody else's involvement. And we're going to suggest for the universities that the internal audit charter that each internal auditor has would be co-signed by the chair of fiscal affairs at the time with the campus CEO. So it wouldn't just be the campus that's signing the charter, it would also be a regent. In light of that, I think that was everything, and Kate can help me if I miss anything, but we also decided it would be a good idea to spread out the internal audit report so that we don't do 6 in one meeting, that we would do a few at a time. So Chris Kavanaugh spoke to you last month, and we've got Kate and Jamie from Pittsburgh State here today.
Sounds good. Welcome, Kate Neely from the University of Kansas.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, and thank you, Elaine. You covered that exactly, and I'll touch on a few of those points in my presentation as well. I also have with me Jared Castning. He's our Director of Internal Audit. So he's here with me today as well. We could just go straight to slide 2 of our packet. I like to start with our mission and vision statement because I think this really is the simplest way to explain our internal audit's role within the university. And I'm not going to read all of it, but it's really just that first line of our vision where we state that we provide independent and objective assurance and audit and advisory, services to the university. So really the important aspects of that being independent and objective. What Elaine was just talking about with the independence, that comes through by nature of our reporting relationship to this committee, our reporting relationship, or my reporting relationship within the university. And both of those are memorialized in K-Board policy. We also, I like to point out the assurance, one more comment, one more comment on that one, our assurance and advisory services. So when I think of our assurance activities, those are, what you think of with audit projects, and I'll go through our audit plan. But Jared and I, in particular, from our office, spend a lot of time providing advisory services to KU leadership. And I think that's really important in how we provide that incremental value and benefit to leadership and to the university. So as issues come up or there are new initiatives, to the extent that we can advise on risk considerations, provide advice and guidance, where our leadership really takes us up on that. And I think that's an important use of Jared's and my time. Moving to the next slide is our kind of year in review. A lot of words on this page, but I'll just touch on a little bit of it. We work against a risk-based audit plan each year. And again, we'll go through what that plan is, but we kind of joke that that plan is usually good until probably February. It's a calendar year plan. It is risk-based, but we also position ourselves to be really responsive to emerging risks, whether that's kind of global risks, what's going on in the higher ed or industry environment, things that may come up within the institution, and just being, again, responsive to leadership requests as whether it's the chancellor or CFO or what have you, as they're seeing concerns or risks, we try to position ourselves to be responsive to their requests. One final note on that top bullet, I'm, along with a few others, our chief compliance officer and we administer our institutional hotline. So I see all anonymous hotlines that come in to our university hotline. Sometimes those require us to investigate or review further. We also have a continuing focus on continuous improvement within our office, as well as professional development. So we really take a lot of pride in the professional development of our staff. That really comes through as attendance at conferences. We co-host a training day every summer with legislative post-audit and the Johnson County auditors. And we host several different state, county, and local audit offices. We have really good turnout for that. Jared and I speak to different classes on campus. We get a lot of joy out of connecting with students and talking about what internal audit is. I mentioned a focus on continuing improvement. We have a quality assurance plan or program, excuse me, within our office. And so whenever anyone asks who audits the auditors, we not only have a required every 4-year external review of us, which will be due for this coming year, but we also have a team within our office that we're reviewing our own processes and making sure that we're in conformance with standards, as well as identifying any process improvement opportunities. Elaine mentioned this already, so I'll kind of breeze through this. We have a renewed focus on governance and management of the internal audit function. The new professional standards coming out that'll go into effect in January are really prescriptive in what governance and management of the internal audit function should look like. At one point, Elaine already mentioned it, we got together, not at one point, several times, the K-Board auditors and Elaine, we got together and we discussed what that needs to look like for us, and ultimately decided what needs to happen we can handle on our end. And so for KU, what that looks like is making sure that we have an all-encompassing charter in place that will be signed by our chancellor and chair of this committee, updating our internal audit manuals to be encompassing of how the function, how our office is managed. We have certain required attestations that we need to make to this committee, as well as to our leadership, which I'll get into. And for us too, it's really strong engagement with our university leadership. So at KU, we have an executive risk committee that I attend the monthly meetings for that executive risk committee. I present the audit plan in December, before coming to this committee. I also provide interim updates throughout the year to that committee. Moving to our attestations, ultimately, I have no concerns in any of these areas. I talked about the audit charter. We last updated it in 2019. We review it regularly, have not needed to update it until this year. So we're adding in those required elements for the standards that will go into effect in 2025. I anticipate we'll have that fully completed early this next semester. One item I missed on the last slide, but I'll talk about it here. One, as we talk about independence of the internal audit function, it's important that my position be independent, but also that I disclose to the committee and to leadership if I have non-audit responsibilities. So a few months ago, I assumed additional responsibility in supervising our risk management office. So that's largely our university insurance program. But really the main purpose of that was to assume additional responsibility in our enterprise risk management program at KU with some pretty clear directives on further maturing that program. With that, obviously, if there were ever a time where that non-audit responsibility I have in my portfolio, should that create a real or perceived conflict, that could be an issue. And so we elevated Jared's position to be not only Director of Internal Audit, but also Associate Chief Audit Executive. So in any situation where there may be a conflict with my position in that additional supervisory responsibility, we've formalized for Jared that he would step in as acting CAE, acting Chief Audit Executive, excuse me, in those situations. The other attestation I wanted to make here, we have 8 FTE in the office. We'll be fully resourced, all positions filled as of January 5th. Really excited about that. I already mentioned on the going to the next slide, we do put together and execute a risk-based audit plan that takes into account a lot of considerations. I've tried to summarize them here. So we have ongoing engagement with our stakeholders, with leadership, and I won't go through all of these, but all that's to say we have several risk inputs that go into building our audit plan, which is a good segue into our audit plan. I already mentioned taking a greater role with ERM. So a couple of things I'd like to orient you to in this table. I didn't realize how small it would appear, but just to orient you to it, we have started mapping all of our audits and all of our audit topics to an ERM, Enterprise Risk Management risk area. And so you'll see that on the far left. This first page shows audit topics that map to our operating model ERM risk. On the far left, I alluded to all of those considerations that go into building our risk-based audit plan. And so we've taken it a step further to actually put those onto our plan here. So you can see for each audit topic, what were the direct inputs that led to us having it on here. We have a few pages of audits here. What I'll just touch on a few of these. We have two projects this year where we'll be looking at financial control validations. So cash handling is one, and we'll really be looking at processes, internal controls, the effectiveness of those controls. Anytime there's money involved, we bump it up as an inherently higher risk process. So we really strive to have coverage of that over the years. Another I'll point out, it's timely, it was discussed earlier during this meeting. I took on a little bit of a role in helping with the KBOR cyber maturity assessment that all of the KBOR institutions will undergo. It's actually started at KU already. So I assisted in engaging the external firm that's performing that engagement. And then now that it's gotten kicked off internally to KU and KU Medical Center, I'll play a role in providing advisory support to our IT leadership as they go through that process. And then immediately below that, we anticipate that there will be findings and actions coming out of that assessment. And so once we have the report early next year, we will look at what those findings are, work with IT leadership, and identify what additional IT audit work we can do in support of that. Moving to the next page, I'll just highlight that we have coverage over our business model and compliance risks. I already touched on some of the financial control validation work that we will do. We have some follow-up work slated as well. And then the second line there, I'll point out, we also have a few transition reviews on our plan. This comes from Chancellor Girard requesting of us several years ago that we set aside a certain amount of hours each year in providing assurance and kind of assessment of units that are undergoing a leadership transition. So think a change in dean, a change in a major unit directorship. Moving on quickly.
We have a question?
On those, do you do it when the dean leaves or when where in the transition are you doing the audit?
That's a great question, and I'll say, yes, it depends. We've done it all because it really depends on the timing and the nature of, will there be an interim? Will it go straight from previous dean to the next dean? We've had a lot of success doing the work when there's an interim in place. And so we try to do that. One that we're completing right now at the medical center, it actually made a lot more sense to let the new dean come in and get her footing. And she expressed to us, hey, here are the areas that I don't quite have figured out yet. And can you help me there? So it really just depends. We've had success both interim, after the fact, before. It's situational.
Thank you.
Wrapping up our audit plan. We always have hours dedicated to research, federally sponsored research. That's another inherently high risk, highly regulated area. So we have that covered, as well as safety and health as a primary risk that we'll get coverage of. I mentioned this already. We are due for an external quality review. We'll slate that for fall of 25. Just as a heads up, I've participated as on the peer review teams for other peer institutions. They will likely want to speak to the chair of this committee and interview for that. And then the final page that I'll touch on, these are our annual recurring or ongoing projects. The only one I'll single out here is our annual conflict of interest review. This is the only audit that we are required to perform by KBOR policy. And so confirming that we do it and that we will plan to do it. Finally, I'm happy to answer questions on anything you've seen. This slide just shows the status of last year's plan, what we have complete, almost complete, or in progress. And then I also included for your reference our org chart and staff biographies.
Very thorough, Kate. Thank you so much. Any questions for Kate? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very lucky to have you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you again. Also very pleased to have with us from Pittsburgh State University, new to this role, Jamie Dalton. Good morning, Jamie.
Hello, I wish I had Kate's height. Good morning. Good morning. No.
Kate, you didn't steal the clicker, did you? Okay.
Audit the clicker.
We'll track it down.
You have investigators in the room. That's right. I failed if it's that the clicker is supposed to be here.
Point out that you may be new to the role, but certainly not new to Pittsburgh State University.
Yes, and I actually will touch on that for sure.
Perfect.
So appreciate that.
That's a perfect lead in.
Right, I know. So I thank you for setting me up for that. Very much so. So I'm new, but not really. I've been at Pittsburgh State since 2006. I've been on the university cabinet since 2013. So you're starting to making me feel a little old when I say those dates. But, and then for the last couple of years since President Shipp has been with us, my title has been, oh, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. My title was the executive director of university affairs. And within that, you can imagine it's a little bit of a broad umbrella of the things you cover there. But the bigger buckets were meant to be strategic planning for the university, and then conducting basically informal audits, going into different areas on an as-needed basis, and focusing, as it says, on structures, processes, procedures, ways to make some changes. So I was excited with this role coming open, and it gave me an opportunity to consolidate the work I'm doing with strategic planning into also our internal audit function. Background wise, it makes me qualified for the role. I do have an MBA from Pitt State, go Pitt State. And really just my years at being kind of at the umbrella view of the university has given me quite a breadth of knowledge of how we function, and just a different outlook of some of the things we do well and some of the things maybe we could be looking at doing better. So I appreciate having that view going into this. And then obviously internal audit and strategic planning, if you think about it, go hand in hand, because the things that audit finds that we need to be doing really need to be part of our plan to move us forward. So that's me. Now I need to figure out which button. Oh, I did it. Thank you. Just need to look up. Our mission. So with our strategic plan that I know President Shipp has filled you in on the last couple of years, how we came to have our plan. Our mission is to make life better through education. And what we have really done is asked the university to make this their mission as well. So we've asked not everyone within the university to have their own mission statement, that this is our focus of what we do as an institution. Now, of course, we all have our own kind of sub mission of that. But I wanted to highlight that really, even through the internal audit function, my role is to make life better through education. As Kate referenced, the required reporting from IIA, our audit charter, I have updated it as of this fall. It was approved by President Shipp, and Elaine has it as ready to sign by this committee. So I think we're in good shape there. Let me know if you need anything. Dan, of course, signed in Sharpie, so you will see that on the when you open up the folder. And the independence of the internal audit function, reporting lines are appropriate. I definitely feel that I have unrestricted access to senior management and to this committee and the board. Audit plan, progress, and results I will get into. Resource requirements I feel to be adequate. I will note that we have changed the structure of our institutional compliance and integrity office. It now reports to me as internal audit. So it is kind of a secondary step to combine those two into one office, which will be very helpful to us moving forward. I'm excited about that. Compliant, no issues with ethics and standards, and management's response to risk is definitely acceptable, no issues. So our audit plan for FY24, we did not have, as you know, we had a vacant position. Our former auditor went to lead our cashier's office, which is wonderful, and we were glad to keep her. She's a great campus resource, but it left the audit position open. So we did not have an actual audit plan for FY24, but I wanted to note a few things that did still happen. Specifically, the affiliated corporations review, which is mandated, that was completed. And then the other three are things that I completed through the year as part of the executive affairs role and transitioning into this role. So the nursing financial statements, that is mandated each year, and that was completed. We transitioned to having a partnership with CHC SEK to run our Bryant Student Health Center. And so I did an operational audit of that transition, and am in progress, or as we left the year into the next year, an investigation into our Crossland College of Technology, mostly processes and procedure and structure. So then leading into this year, our university cabinet serves as my audit committee, and I do serve on cabinet still. So great resource, great way to have continual conversation about things that are coming up that I need to address with them. Definitely complete access to that group of leadership. So for this year, it was decided, and I came up with this audit plan based on, we do risk assessment similar to KU, it's risk-based. We perform our assessment every 2 years and then take feedback from that and leadership across campus to develop the plan. So I went back and found what had come from that last plan that was done, 2 auditors before now, and then worked with cabinet to determine what we should look at for this coming year, or the year we're in now. So again, the affiliated corporations, continuing with the Crossland College of Technology, leadership changes, as Kate noted, we do the same as we have anyone exit a leadership role at a certain level and higher, we automatically do a look into the finances, especially process and procedures definitely too, but definitely the finance side of it for any risk there. And we are a little bit behind because we've had several leadership changes and not an auditor. So catching up on some of those, but that's going really well. Doing a lot of interviews on that with people who have been in place during that transition. So that's been helpful. Repair and replacement planning, police and public safety, again, the nursing financial statements, and then moving on to our Kansas Center for Career and Tech Ed will be the plan for this year. And of course, as I'm sure with everyone, our plans are flexible. If things come up that need to be audited, certainly we can edit this as needed with the university cabinet's approval. Not a problem there. Other activities, I serve on the cabinet and a variety of campus committees. I didn't list them all there because I'm sure that would be exciting for everyone, but we did set up a new process to facilitate a risk assessment exercise. And that's part of the upcoming changes that I think are working through the governance committee. And we did go ahead and complete ours as a cabinet in November. And so our next steps on that is to take the findings and relate it back to our strategic plan and make sure that we have initiatives that came out of that risk assessment. Do we have the initiatives in place in our plan to make sure that we're addressing those? So in my research so far, we do. So we're in good shape there, but moving that forward. I also need to address and probably overhaul the way that we did our risk analysis in the past, our process of asking campus what we should be looking into. So that will be in the spring. We do also have an anonymous hotline that we manage. The person in the compliance role actually manages that for us and reports up to me any issues happening. Consulting as requested by various departments, and then my own professional development. Bless you. So that was a quick look at what we're doing this year. Any questions?
Great job, Jamie.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jamie? Yes, Regent Winter.
What do you consider the biggest risk? Most significant risk?
In general? That's a great question. I would say right now for us, and I think as a system as a whole, leadership change and just the lack of historical perspectives of campus and overcoming some of that and making sure we're still dotting all of our I's and crossing all of our T's with all of the changes that are still coming in.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know it's not necessarily easy to do, but I was really impressed last month. We heard from Wichita State, and they've intentionally made risk analysis a campus-wide effort and really go above and beyond to point out that everyone has a role in risk analysis. It may ultimately be the responsibility of one person or one office, but everybody has a role in that. So we've talked a lot about collaboration today, but we just encourage all of our institutions to do what you can to make that a campus-wide effort, because it really does take everybody.
Absolutely. And great feedback. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Item C, review state support for state universities operations. Vice President Frisbee.
I think we're there. All right, very good. So committee members, you'll remember that another item on our work plan for this year is to talk a little bit about the state universities and how they receive their state funding. And so I'm going to go over, this is going to be a pretty quick rendition here. So just to set some perspective, we were appropriated from the 24 legislature just over $1.3 billion from the state general fund. Of that amount, then, that's our sort of our starting point, our baseline for thinking about planning for the 26 budget. The Division of the Budget goes in and thinks about what items within that $1.359 billion need to be adjusted. So we were provided $13.7 million for the state employee pay plan, which was the equivalent of a 2.5% merit pool, whereas other state agencies were provided a 5% merit pool. We were provided as a system 4.8 million for health insurance benefits for our employees, so that the employee premium will not increase in the coming year, but the employer share is increasing. And then they removed $254.7 million for items that they considered as one time. $75 million for the Cancer Center project would be an example for that. And then when you met in September, you came and developed a request for roughly $280 million request. 61 million of it roughly is for things that we're terming as continuing. So the IT funding from the state, the student success money, albeit at a smaller number, and funding for the two-year colleges, tiered and non-tiered courses as an example. And then there's roughly $220 million for the new items in the budget. So that's setting the stage then for 2026. But how do we as state agencies receive our funding? So the legislature has responsibility for making appropriations. In many cases, they send money to our agency, the Kansas Board of Regents, and we pass those dollars on, such as from the Capital Renewal Initiative, demolition funding, the IT cybersecurity funding. But much of the funding for the universities is also appropriated directly to them from the legislature. So in the appropriation bill, there are sections for each of the state universities. And in fact, K-State has 3 separate state agencies. For the coordinated institutions, for the most part, their state funding passes through our agency, although there are opportunities in other agencies. The Department of Commerce comes to mind, where they might receive a grant. We also administer the state's financial aid programs for students. So if you think about Washburn University, our one municipal university, they receive an operating grant. They also get, on occasion, capital project funding. So in this year's request for 2026, there is funding for their science labs, for example. The community and technical colleges, they receive tiered and non-tiered state aid, the Excellency TE for high school students, and all the other myriad state and federal funds that come through our agency. And then our private independent colleges benefit from participation in our student financial aid programs. So slightly different tracks. But let's talk a little bit mostly about the state universities. So before 2002, fiscal year 2002, the old model coupled state general fund, and I'm like Kate, my numbers here are a little bit too small in my font size. The old model coupled state general fund operating dollars with tuition. So if you had revenue growth in your tuition from enrollment or your rate increased, then your state general fund would be reduced as an offset. So there was a total amount of your budget was calculated. Every employee was, their pay and fringes was calculated. You might get a little adjustment to your other operating funding. And there was a total budget that was calculated by the Division of Budget Analyst, and that would go through the legislative process. And depending on how much you needed from state general fund, it would vary. So again, if the board was going to raise your rates, you might have a little state general fund taken away. So that green line in the left box is to signify there's an amount calculated, and the 2 amounts for revenue for your tuition and your general fund, they were coupled together. Starting with fiscal year 2002, that model changed so that your tuition, as it grew or reduced, the university, the system, the Board of Regents owned that. It was called tuition ownership. It was intended at the time to give the system more flexibility and an incentive to grow. So think about back 22 years ago, we were experiencing some enrollment growth. It was a request from the Board of Regents to the governor. At the time, it would have been Bill Graves, I believe. The proposal was adopted, the legislature agreed to it. And so now what the concept at the time was, these state universities were to receive their state appropriations as they have. And then the Board of Regents would be given an operating grant to then decide how much should be going out from that to each of the state universities. We've never quite fully adopted the original vision. We have had some years where there has been an operating grant, but it's been pretty far and few between. So I hope that helps explain where we used to be back in the old days and now how we have been for quite some time. So how much state universities receive from the state general fund is not really pegged to their tuition and has basically just been a factor of how much our advocacy has been successful in garnering more state general fund for a particular purpose, such as for the geological survey or some particular academic program that gets added to Emporia State or to another campus, the nursing initiative for Fort Hays. That has been more where we have had success in garnering more state general fund, rather than a recognition from the legislature that inflation is affecting the campuses, and so they need a little bump on their base. I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions about how this has all gone down.
I think it's a helpful overview. So if I understand correctly, the base hasn't really been considered since 2002. It's pretty well.
Pretty
safe to
much
say.
not. It's really been dependent on, to the extent where there have been across the board reductions applied, where we've had leaner times, or where we've had success in special projects that have stuck, if you will, to the base as recurring items.
Okay.
Or where we'd received funding for state employee pay plans.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions of Elaine? Yes, Regent Winter.
So is this adjustment, Elaine, is this automatic? The adjustment that you mentioned about the general fund when the tuition goes up or down?
It used to be, yes. When I went, well, so pre-2002, it was a calculation. There were policies agreed to. So there was the normal process of the budget being handed to division of the budget and the governor and then the legislature. And there would be an agreement that this much for employees and this much for the OOE base. And at the time, if a university added more space to a building, maybe they built a new building, then there was a formula for how much operating money you'd be given. It was called servicing new buildings, and you would get staff and funding to operate and maintain that building.
So if additional general fund money is made available, is that money, it goes to the campuses?
Mhm.
And are there typically restrictions? I know it could vary from year to year, but are there typically restrictions, limitations on that additional use of that additional money?
It depends on how it's appropriated. So if the funding goes to the university via their operating expenditures line item, generally it's freely available to be used for the operation of the campus. If it's dedicated to a particular purpose, the Midwest Stem Cell Therapy Program, then it must be used for that. But otherwise, generally not, there aren't restrictions or limitations, just for the operation for the campus.
So if the policy was made to give for spending of this money, that would go in the OOE budget, the other operating expenses budget.
Regent Winter, I'm not sure I'm tracking. So
I'm trying to figure out if we were interested, if a person was interested in having it, the universities receive more money, and particularly making that money, allowing the president, the chancellor to decide where that money goes, where would you put it?
in their operating expenditure line.
That's what I thought.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Then it's fungible.
My other slides, just as an example, I pulled up Fort Hays State, and of course you can't read it, it's so small, but each individual campus has their own state operating appropriations. There is no formula or generally no mechanism for the legislature to recognize the effects of inflation other than maybe the employee pay plan, or if there are recognition of fringe benefit changes like health insurance. The other coordinated institutions, Washburn University receives an operating line item through our agency. It was at $14 million for several years. This has been in place for decades. So they do get a state grant. It is, I think, about half of what they receive in student tuition. So it is a minority contribution to their campus, but still quite important to them. They did get a little bump in 2025. So their current operating grant is 14.27 million. And that is the assumption that's in our base budget for 2026. And one of the reasons this conversation got sparked, so there was a handout provided from Fort Hays to the regents back in April when you were there for your campus visit. And at the time, the university was referencing the relative scale of what Fort Hays receives on a per student basis compared to the others. And why might that be? If you look back to 2002, and where the universities were in terms of how their budget was calculated, from 2002, they had 20 some years of enrollment growth. And in that growth, they benefited from those tuition revenues under the tuition ownership model, but there was no state funding that came along with those students. So the expectation was, or what happened was Fort Hays then had the benefit of the tuition revenue, but there was no state assistance to come along and help with the operating costs to address the needs of those students and delivering instruction to those students. So you might also remember in July, one of the pages in our budget workshop materials, we had a graph that compared by sector the tech colleges, the community colleges, Washburn, and the regional and research universities relying on IPEDS data from 2022. That's still the most recent finance data we have, the federal IPEDS data, because that's the information we have collectively across all the different coordinated and governed institutions. There was a concern that this information is lumping together too many unlike institutions. So we went back and looked at just the universities and picked 2024 data and their state general fund actual expenses and their FTE students. And so you can see the variance there. It is, as you would expect, the KU Medical Center and the K-State Vet Med Center have a much higher subsidy rate from the state for their operations because those courses are they're much more expensive to deliver. And you can just see from their state funding alone, so not looking at anything local or on the student side, tuition, just the state general fund provides some information there for you. Yes.
And then when you look at that Fort Hays state number on that bottom right,
Yeah.
does that include China or is that just domestic, online and on campus?
This is the entirety of their enrollment. This is everything that gets reported to us.
So that would include China?
I believe so. Yes, it is. Yes.
Thank you.
8730. Yep. Okay. And I just to make sure we're clear also on the two-year colleges, we do have an instructional cost model that we use to calculate the state aid for the colleges. This is nearly or roughly $200 million a year of state funding that we push out to the two-year colleges. So not an inconsequential amount. That cost model does not address all of the college's costs for what they do. Delivering instruction to non-resident or out-of-state students. It doesn't address any auxiliaries that they have, athletics. It's just the courses that they're delivering to Candace resident students. But one feature of that cost model is that we do account for inflationary adjustments over time. So we have incorporated inflation since the beginning of this model that was launched back in 2011. So they do have the benefit at least of that recognition in their cost model. And again, just to point out, our private independent institutions, there are 21 of those schools. They do not typically receive direct state grants, although they did receive $10 million in Kansas ARPA funding back in the 22 session. And we did have an instance last session where Kansas Wesleyan presented to the House Higher Education Budget Committee requesting a $2 million appropriation for regenerative agriculture and collaborative communities. That was not funded. It didn't proceed out of the committee, but was a request from a private institution. And of the 22 financial aid programs that we currently administer, the private schools are eligible for 11 of those, so half. And they received just under $15 million last year of our funding. So not wanting to solve for this today, Mr. Chairman, but wanted to give you some context and background to just sort of launch the discussion. And I also want to mention that our agency, the Board of Regents, is a member of the SHIO organization, which is our national organization of state higher education executive officers. And they have a community of practice that is underway this year. And Kansas, we are participating in that. And it is an opportunity for us to look at how funding models could be potentially applied. And one of the meetings that we just attended was from a research organization in Wisconsin that has a framework for how a state might examine its funding for higher education institutions in the state. First of all, identifying where there are inequities, obviously, is an important piece of that, but then trying to develop an adequacy target. One of the items in the board's request, well, there are several, but one key one is regional stabilization funding. We did have success with that item in the 25 budget, and there is another request in 26, trying to get at this feature of trying to bring up, elevate some of our four-year universities funding from the state. So I would open it up for questions or stop there.
That's a good overview, and I think it's a good introduction to an important discussion, because I think the situation at Fort Hays State is a great example of how much things can change in 20 years. So I think it is an important conversation for us to have, and appreciate you providing the overview. Any questions, any clarifications of Vice President Frisbee? Thank you, Elaine. Yes, Regent Winter.
Make this a quick question. Looking at the draft of the request, funding request for next year, top item in the document I have is the student affordability item, $90 million. What kind of percentage increase in SGF from the legislature to regions would it require to fund that? At $90 million, trying to figure out where that money would come from.
I'll have to.
Knowing that the budget division is sending out messages that expect a lean year, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, so one of the slides I had in my earlier draft of this PowerPoint displayed the State General Fund profile as our special legislative budget committee is working from, that shows years out 26 through fiscal year 29 that show a diminishing ending balance depending on your assumptions. So going out so far, I didn't think would be a productive discussion for this group today, but clearly the administration, the governor's office, and the legislature are concerned about the level of spending relative to revenues that are anticipated. I'd have to do the math to compute what that $90 million is off of our $1 billion roughly budget, but it is a couple percentages. And so the description of how we've explained this to the legislature is it's important for the board in your planning for future tuition rate increases, that if you can provide us some relief on the state side, then we can really focus in more on our student affordability, which includes over it's 14.6 million directly for student assistance.
Great, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Vice President Frisbee. Right. Any other questions? All right, and I believe next item is progress on state university capital renewal initiative. We'll cover that this afternoon with Director Bristow. Review audit findings. Doesn't appear that we have any. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, sounds good. Any other business to come before the committee this morning? It's a lengthy meeting, but I appreciate everybody's attention. We covered a lot of ground today.